can we give Chris a hand for moving his family out here and being a part? So, fostering, kind of and those terms, you're saying, well, where'd you find that in the Bible? That's just those are three strategic names that we have just put on those things. Because honestly, in the Bible, it should be by birth. People should be in our church planting churches. Because it's such a foreign concept in this church system that we have in America, doesn't happen a lot. So those terms that we have, and it's good. I think the fostering is great because we're able to have somebody come into our city and say, hey, we're going to walk alongside you and kind of help you learn Tucson and help you learn the ropes. But just the first question is, tell us a bit about your family and why Tucson.
Yeah. So speaking of fostering, so we have 4 kids. Their ages are 3, 4, 6, and 7. So if you're wondering, is it loud in your house? The answer is 100%. Like, if someone's crying all the time, it's either me or my wife. Those are 2 predominant criers in our home. But our kids, we fostered and adopted them when we lived back in Texas. Fostered our kids for about 2.5 years, exactly 878 days before we adopted them all together. And then during that time frame of fostering our kids, we knew that legally we could not move from where we were. That's just the law when you have foster kids in your house. And at the same time, we started feeling this kind of unrest in our heart that God was leading us to go plant a church somewhere, sometime after we're done with the foster care part of our family, right? And so we began just to pray and consider, God, where would you have us? We always just kind of assumed we would plant in the state of Texas. My wife and I are both from Texas. It's almost like a sin to leave Texas if you're from Texas. And we just began to pray for a long time with open hands of, God, where would you have us? And we knew we wanted to plant near a university. We believe that college campuses are the most strategic mission field in the U.S. Nowhere better, I think, to plant a church than next to a university, to develop students, to disciple students, and to send them out literally across the world wherever they get jobs to be missionaries for the glory of God. And so we knew we wanted to plant near a university. I was a college pastor for like 7 years back in Texas. We just didn't know where. And then in the process of that, my wife's sister graduated from Texas A&M in College Station with an aerospace engineering degree, landed a job at Raytheon here in Tucson, and that's when we began to ask the question, what is Tucson? We didn't know anything about it. We didn't even know that U of A was here. We knew that they had cactuses. That was the extent of our knowledge, and that Raytheon was here. Those are the 2 things that we knew. And over the course of time, we began to learn more about this city, and man, our hearts just began to break for this city. We began to learn things that Tucson is the 16th most post-Christian city in the United States. It beats New York, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas, cities that are, in my opinion, known for being fairly post-Christian. It's the 12th most unchurched and de-churched city, so people that have never been to church or were a part of churches and then left that church. The 12th most unchurched and de-churched city in the U.S., and one of the most churchless cities in the U.S. as well. 1 church for every 1,700 people in Tucson. So unless every church by next Sunday becomes a mega church, we don't have the square footage to reach the city. On top of that, if you compare that to a Dallas, Texas, I grew up in Arlington, Texas, so DFW is technically my home, okay? If you compare that to a Dallas, Texas, Dallas has 1 church for every 275 people. If everyone in Dallas, Texas, next Sunday wants to go to church, Dallas can do it. Tucson can't. And we saw that, and we saw the brokenness, we saw the spiritual darkness, the spiritual dryness. And man, we started thinking this. We said, someone needs to plant a church in this city. And over the course of time, that became clear that somebody was us and our family. And wow. God just broke our hearts, and we put our yes on the table, and then God just started opening up all the right doors.
Tell these folks a little bit about your vision, and maybe as close as you can to a timeline or milestones, but tell us a little about your vision.
Yeah, so like I said, we believe that the college campus is the most strategic mission field on the planet. The next generation of church planners, the next generation of ministry leaders and missionaries are on the college campus. And so our hope, our vision is literally to saturate the city of Tucson with gospel-proclaiming, Bible-believing churches. That's what we want to be about. That's what we want to do. We want to saturate this city so that one day Tucson is not one church for every 1,700 people. We want to see it to where there's one day we're like Dallas, where there's one church for every 300, 400 people. So we want to saturate this city with gospel-proclaiming, Bible-believing churches. That's key for us because not every church in this city is gospel-proclaiming, and not every church in this city is Bible-believing. Yeah. We want to plant churches that are gospel-proclaiming, Bible-believing churches to a degree in which this city, we can say, is saturated with those kind of churches, right? Where there's actually enough churches to reach the city. We want to plant strategically next to the University of Arizona because we believe that planting near U of A and the surrounding area is insanely influential for this city. This city loves U of A. Our family loves you. We were at High Corbett yesterday for the last home game for baseball. We love U of A, right? And we think that U of A really is the heartbeat of the entire city. This is a college town with 1.3 million people, right? And we think that if you want to reach the city, you reach the campus. And we think that if we can reach the campus and the surrounding area where there's influential people in Midtown, the neighborhood that we live in, we joke because every house has either a doctor or a lawyer in their house. Our next door neighbor is the chief medical officer for the county, right? Important person to know, okay? And so we want to reach that area of the city because we believe that out of that area of the city that we can plant churches all across the city. That there are students that are coming into U of A or about to graduate from U of A that God is gifting and wiring to be future church planters. We want to convince them to stay and find a spot in the city to reach for the glory of God.
That's good.
And so strategically, we're positioning ourselves in a heavily, heavily, heavily influential area next to the U of A and the surrounding space. We say that we're a Midtown church, that we're a multi-generational church with a strong emphasis on the next generation of college students for the purpose of church multiplication. And so kind of timeline what that looks like, we have a core team that is currently on their way of moving from Texas out to Arizona, out to Tucson, to be a part of this. They're getting houses in Midtown. One of them lives literally 5 minutes just north of us. They brought a U-Haul yesterday that we unpacked in like 2 hours before we had to go get on a plane and fly back to Texas to grab his family and bring them back here next week, okay? So between the next week and the next 6 weeks, there's a group of people from Texas that are moving out here in Midtown to work here, live here, buy homes here, and to reach that pocket of the city. And so that's kind of stage one, is developing our core team. Stage two is to make and multiply disciples to the extent where we can start gathering those disciples on a Sunday morning. And then stage three really is to build up laborers to reach this city for the glory of God.
Man, I really love that because, as you watched the video a while ago, some of you said, I've seen this video. Why are you showing it again? I just wanted to show you again because that's what we did. Like, when you're thinking, okay, how different is this than Aspire? Well, it's different in the uniqueness of our people and our giftings, but as far as making disciples, it's the same. And the small groups, it's the same. It's not about a church service, it's about making disciples. So I love that. Hey, just real briefly, tell me, how can we be praying for you?
Yeah. So like I said, we got a core team that's on their way out here. It's actually really cool. Today, there's one guy moving out here that's going to be on our staff. He's like our director of discipleship and formation. Essentially, that's a fancy title to say he's our college pastor. And so he literally preached today, was his last sermon in Galveston today. And then they also prayed over and commissioned our team as a whole from that church as they depart out here, which is super cool. And so one of our families is on their way next week. 2 weeks after that, another, and they're going to trickle in between now and the end of June.
Awesome.
And so one thing to be praying for is just for them to safely get settled out here and move out here. They're uprooting their whole families and everything like that as well. There's some of them that need a few more final details, jobs, some housing stuff that needs to kind of be figured out a little bit. So be praying for that. And then the last thing I would say is this, is continue to pray for us to find favor, especially gospel-centered favor, with our neighbors and the people of Midtown. We have been sharing the gospel literally like crazy. It has been amazing to see people in our neighborhood who want nothing to do with God start opening up to us about spirituality and about the hurt that they've experienced in the past regarding church or religion or whatever it might be. And God's really, I think, has paved the way for some gospel inroads and some gospel pathways with a lot of our neighbors. And it's been really amazing. I think God's doing some really amazing work in some of our friends' lives. And so please be praying that God would continue, that we just find favor with them, that the gospel would take root in our neighborhood, and that this church would get established so that we can plant even more churches right here in this city.
Man. Thank you, Chris. Yeah. Can we hear it for Chris? Thank you, man. Love you, man. Continue to pray for Chris and Kristen.